Welcome back to Raised by Giants discussion. I'm your host, Ryder Lee. Welcome any moderators and channel members out there. If you're watching on YouTube or X, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, or if you're listening to the replay, welcome to the show. All of my social media links are in the description: Facebook, Instagram, X. Great ways to stay connected on there. Links to watch my documentaries JFKX and A Clockwork Shining on Amazon Prime and Tubi are also in the description. Still in the process of making my upcoming documentary, Psychic Agent. The research for making a documentary is the most time consuming part of the entire process. It's not the editing or the filming, it's finding the stuff to put in the movie that takes the longest. But bear with me, it's going to be worth it. Also, don't forget to check out Raised by Giants on Ground Zero Radio Plus with Clyde Lewis. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 11:30 a.m. and Saturday, 5 p.m. on the Ground Zero Radio Plus network. Link is in the description. With that down, we have with us today UK music journalist, club and radio DJ, author of many books, and he's in my documentary, A Clockwork Shining, A Kubrick's Odyssey 3, broadcasting from the UK, Mark Devlin. Welcome back to the show. It's good to see you.
What's up, brother? Good to be back.
Man, we're living in really fascinating times. And I believe people are really finally starting to realize that fiction just isn't fiction anymore. You know, like how Hollywood has been using fiction to unravel and allegorically reveal reality in many different ways to symbolically let everyone know what's actually going on. And I think that there's a bunch of films that need to be re-examined in this regard, that may hold the keys to understanding the future. And I have a few films that I want to bring up with you to get your discussion on that I'm going to mention. But does any film, movie, or any work of art really come to mind that you think that we should be taking another look at?
Well, there is one, but not in the context of current affairs and politics. I've been doing a lot of research into the true nature of this reality. What is this place? You know, what force or entity created it? To what end? What we might call God? What is the true nature of this entity or force called God? What is this place in which we find ourselves? Isn't it absurd that at some point in early childhood we become vaguely conscious of the fact that we exist and there's a world that we live in, but beyond that there are no clear answers as to what we're doing here? I mean, lots of people claim to have the answers. You'll get one religious minister that will say, my holy book has all the answers, my messianic figure is the one to revere and worship. And then immediately you'll have another religious minister who will pop up and say, no, 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 you're a heathen. That's blasphemy. My religious figure is the one, and my religious text is the one to go with. And then a third guy will pop up and say, you're both wrong. You're both wrong. It's my faith. Mine is the one. And you're supposed to make sense of all of this somehow. There's no manual, there's no guidebook, you're just stumbling around in the dark and left to make the best of it. So I've been asking these big questions, which I think any human being owes it to themselves to ask while they've got the opportunity within these lives. I'm not claiming that you're going to get the answers, but you can at least ask the questions. So there's one movie that I've been revisiting, which somebody directed me to just recently, which is The Truman Show, which I think is a really great allegory for the human condition, these lives. So if you think about it, Jim Carrey's character is representative of all of us, of people, humans, because he finds himself in this reality where he realizes he's being monitored and surveilled. And that could be a metaphor for perhaps the way we're watched by entities, I don't know, in unseen realms. And he gradually comes to realize that the people around him are all actors playing roles. So this fits the idea of NPCs that we hear about, non-player characters, these normie figures who seem to just float through life and they don't seem to ask these big questions that many of us do. And many of them don't seem to have the full range of emotions within their, capabilities. And gradually the Jim Carrey character comes to realize that this world in which he lives is nothing like he thought it was, and it's actually illusory, and it's not it's not real life, it's not the real world, and so he attempts to escape from it all. I mean, there are Gnostic overtones to this, so many people have interpreted it as a Gnostic allegory, so it kind of sits in line with many Gnostic teachings as to what the nature of this realm is. And you've got the Christoph character, who's the handler, the controller, played by Ed Harris in that film. And within this metaphor, he's representative of what in Gnostic terms was described as the demiurge, this entity known as Yaldabaoth, which was like a lesser god, a pretender god, a usurper, who has somehow hijacked this reality and made it its own, or created it in the first place. And the Ed Harris character in the film seeks to maintain that sort of control over Truman, because he's like his creation, his pet project. And he doesn't like the fact that Truman is starting to question where he is and what the true nature of his life is. So that's one movie that springs to mind in terms of asking big questions, or possibly answering them, as to what the nature of this reality is. Because I think when you've been in conspiracy research for long enough, a number of years, like as many years as I have, all roads eventually converge at one singular point. So you can look into secret society networks, and you can look into the New World Order master plan and the methods and tactics that are used to control and surveil us and enslave us. You can look into the banking and financial scams and the Bilderberg Group and the Trilateral Commission, all of these. But there comes a point where all of that just becomes information and data and names and places and dates. And what's really important is going beyond that several levels to ask, what is the nature of a reality in which any of that sort of stuff can take place in the first place? That facilitates these kind of activities playing out into apparently physical manifestation. So that's where I'm at, asking those kind of questions at this point in my life, having done the conspiracy thing for many years. And that movie speaks a lot to me in that regard, in terms of considering these very big questions in life.
Have you seen the controversy that's surrounding Jim Carrey at the moment when he showed up to the Paris award show last week and he looks completely different? He looks like his face has had a bunch of work done and a bunch of plastic surgery, which doesn't make a lot of sense based off of the things that he has said up until this point. That it doesn't seem like he would be the person that would want all of that cosmetic surgery, which has led people to believe that that's not really Jim Carrey, that he's somebody else, that someone's impersonating him, or that he's been cloned and all of that. But what is really strange about that entire scenario is that he does look like a different person. He's obviously had work done if it really is him. But what's the most odd about it was at the end of his speech at the award ceremony, he says the ending line that he says at the end of the Truman Show.
In case he doesn't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
In case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And I'm like, wow, if that's not really Jim Carrey, what a play that you just did in front of everyone. It's like a metaphor within a metaphor within a metaphor.
Right. I mean, anything is possible. Could Jim Carrey have been replaced? Sure. They've done it before. Did it with Paul McCartney. They did it for a period with Madonna in round about 2021, or starting in 2021, where they wheeled out, to my thinking, at least 3 different Madonnas. So there was a young one, I can't remember if we talked about this on the show last time, but there was a young one who looked no more than about 30 with pink hair. And that quite obviously was not the real Madonna, who by that point was supposed to be about 65 years of age, or 63, I think. Then there was another one who was short and fat and dumpy, and she appeared on stage in a dance routine in Colombia, and she could barely pull any dance steps and looked completely out of shape. So that clearly was not the original Madonna. And then there was a sort of older, grizzled, haggard sort of one. And it was much more plausible that that could be the real Madonna, but it still wasn't. And then the real one appears to have come back. She's got this very distinctive gap in her teeth. So when she smiles, you know it's her. So we appear to have the original Madonna back, but they played complete mindfuck games on us by putting out these 3 replacements for a period. And who knows why they did that? Maybe it was to see how many people would notice, whether they could get away with it, whether the fans would call it out, how many truth researchers would draw attention to it. Maybe it was a little social experiment in that way. Who knows? And I hear all these claims that famous people have been replaced by clones or doubles or whatever. I've heard it about Jim Carrey. And sure, those pictures that surfaced recently do not look like the original Jim Carrey. But for every person you'll get who claims that he's been replaced, somebody else will pop up and say, oh, come on, Jim Carrey's in Hollywood, and in Hollywood there's plastic surgery, there's all kinds of work you can have done, there's makeup that gets applied in film type scenarios, and that's just Jim Carrey trying to stave off aging. So it just goes to show that there are never any clear answers to anything. Nothing is ever clear cut, because somebody's always going to pop up and be contrary and oppose any kind of claim that you might choose to make. So it just makes this work very, very difficult. You've got to have a lot of time on your hands. You've got to be pretty good at forensic analysis and comparing facial structures and distances between eyes and ears and ear shapes and things like this to be able to make sense of it. I mean, with some it's easier than with others. As far as I'm concerned, with Paul McCartney, it's a clear-cut case. There have been at least 2 individuals playing the public role of Paul McCartney. You can see they're very different. In photographs and film footage, you don't need to be a forensic expert to see that. But with some of these others, I think it requires a much deeper level of expertise if you're going to come out and make bold kind of claims like that. Because when you make a bold claim, people require bold evidence to back it up. And like I say, you've got to have a lot of time and a lot of resources on your hands to be able to back up these kind of claims when they get made.
I think that they did the same thing with Britney Spears that you just explained that they did with Madonna. I'm convinced that the Britney Spears that we see right now that just got arrested, apparently, I don't know if you saw this, but she just got arrested for a DUI, I believe is what it was. I don't believe that that's the same Britney Spears. And I don't believe that that has been the same Britney Spears since around 2011.
Yeah, well, that's quite possible. Like I say, I can't rule it out. Another thing is that during the COVID era, they started using a double for Prince Charles, or King Charles, as he is now. It quite clearly was not him. He appeared on a Sky News broadcast in the middle of COVID, and it was so obvious it was an actor. But most people within the British public didn't notice or didn't care. Like George Carlin once said, nobody seems to care, nobody seems to notice. They got away with it. It's just incredible to me. I mean, somebody like Madonna, you could argue that not many people pay attention to Madonna, or, you know, she only appeals to certain demographics or whatever. But this is the frigging king. Not that I'm suggesting people should pay attention to the king, but, you know, he's a pretty public figure, a pretty important figure within the United Kingdom. And they got away with using a double for him. No explanation as to why it was done. And then the original Prince Charles popped back up again. To my thinking, that's him. We've got him back. So this double was put in for a period. And I don't know, are they getting their mind control topped up in a lab somewhere and they need to put somebody out there? Do they have a bad reaction to certain chemical compounds that they may have been ingesting? Or is it a simple social experiment? Like I said, are the social engineers doing this to see how many people notice and what they can get away with? Or is it to make those who do observe the change and draw attention to it look crazy? So if they try and tell friends and family, that's not the original Prince Charles, they've replaced him, that's a double, that's an actor, and then the original pops back up and you can see that's the original, your family and friends are going to say, you're crazy. Of course that's him. Look, there he is right there. What have you been drinking? What have you been smoking, man?
Yeah, it's a double double. And then when it comes to like cryptic and symbolic movies, but things that are also in your face is the movie Death Becomes Her, which is all about immortality and cults. And we know that the elites are into immortality, alchemy, elixir of life, the philosopher's stone, blood rituals for youth, or even transfer of blood. This goes back hundreds of years, but this one's a little different in this movie. They have this little vial that has a substance in it that reminds me actually of the movie Substance, which is basically a way darker version of that movie that revolves around the same type of thing. It's a modern horror take on it, but it's like an injection instead of a liquid that you drink. Wow. Wow,
Yeah.
Mark, imagine that. And an injection to keep you young. What a coincidence that is. And with those Zempeg and all these weight loss drug injections that are so popular right now, I'm going to have to save that one in my memory bank for later. But anyway, the movie Death Becomes Her, they have this drink and this, what a bunch of people describe as adrenochrome. And what adrenochrome is, it gives them immortality from this super old witch that looks like she's like 30 years old, but it's probably more like over 100 years old. And this witch runs this hidden network of elite power players that she has supplied the substance to over the years. And at the end of the movie, you got all of these people that have taken this substance that has been reportedly dead for a really long time, but is alive and is at this party, which includes Elvis Presley, Marilyn Monroe, James Dean, Andy Warhol, and I'm pretty sure that Jim Morrison was even in there, implying that people we believe died young or unexpectedly might not actually be dead.
Yeah, well, that's something I can't rule out. And certainly when it comes to people like Jim Morrison, I don't buy the suggestion that he died in 1971 at the age of 27 in the bathtub in his Paris apartment. I mean, Jim Morrison is a prime candidate for having been allowed to fake his own death because of who his old man was. You know, the Navy admiral in the Gulf of Tonkin, obviously high-level military connected. You can only fake your death and get away with it with the full complicity of the military intelligence services. So it helps if you've got family connections into those. I've got trouble accepting that Elvis Presley died when we told he did in 1977. I think he would be another prime candidate for having been allowed to fade off into obscurity and pop back up under a new identity and live out his remaining years outside of the public spotlight, because Elvis was high-level military connected as well. And then with others, I think you have to examine each case individually and draw your conclusions based on the evidence. But it's certainly a dynamic which does take place, in my opinion. You know, certain famous people are allowed to fake their deaths in that way. You mentioned there the reference to adrenochrome in Death Becomes Her. You're probably aware that in A Clockwork Orange, Stanley Kubrick's movie, 1971, there's a loose reference to it there when Malcolm McDowell, Alex, and his droogs are in the Korova milk bar at the start of the film. And in the monologue that goes over the top, he says, "We were drinking Drenchrome," which is basically adrenochrome. So Kubrick clearly knew about this stuff. And that's just one of so many things that he was trying to tell us through movies in coded, allegorical ways, I would suggest.
Kubrick had to have known what was going on in that, and also with Eyes Wide Shut. I mean, if you rewatch Eyes Wide Shut right now, it hits in a different kind of way than when you watched it just a few years back. It now hits a little bit different, and you realize more of what was going on.
And what's crazy about that is I've been doing a lot of research into 1980s pop videos, which I've presented in some of my live talks and on a couple of Patreon presentations. So I've been revisiting a lot of videos I would have watched at the time, on MTV or Top of the Pops, probably introduced by Sir Jimmy Savile back in the day. I can remember these videos from the early 80s, and of course the stuff went straight over my head at the time because I didn't know what to look for. But now that I do, now that I've learned what all the symbolism means, it's shocking to see what was right there in plain sight. And a common theme running through so many 80s pop videos from the first part of the decade, I would say, sort of 1980 to about 84, and then it tends to have fizzled out, is how many scenes resemble a scene from Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. So many videos in these sort of Rothschild style elite country mansions where you've got these masked balls going ahead and they're all dressed in Venetian carnival masks and robes and costumes and stuff. This was a big part of the new romantic era, of course, in the early 80s. That whole scene, the whole look, the whole fashion was based on costumes and dressing up as dapper, dandy figures from the past. And lots of references to these elite country mansions. And there's so many videos where you've got black and white checkerboard flooring of the type that you find in Masonic temples. And you've got these ornate, grand balconies and staircases and stuff, and there's figures sort of interacting with those. One that springs to mind is Adam and the Ants' Prince Charming. I mean, that's one you can really get inside when it comes to symbolism, particularly pertaining to trauma-based mind control, MK Ultra and such, and dissociation from reality. Another one is Ultravox Vienna. That kind of tells its own story. And you've got a sort of handler, mind control subject relationship going on there in what gets portrayed in the narrative. And another one is Queen's It's a Hard Life from 1984, which is one of their lesser known singles from their Works album. And this one also is set in an Eyes Wide Shut style sort of country mansion with one of these costume balls taking effect. But for this one, and I mentioned this in my last book, No One's Dad's a Plumber, I got a survivor of satanic ritual abuse, trauma-based mind control, who was raised in one of these families, generational bloodline family, where satanic ritual abuse was just part of what went on. And he's since broken free of that cult, and he's worked with his partner to deprogram himself from what was done to him. And between them, they've learned to spot the symbolism that relates to stuff that he went through. So they know what they're talking about because this guy saw all this stuff, in his childhood and growing up. And they've said that that video to It's a Hard Life, which was directed by a guy named Tim Pope, who's done a few films as well and a fair few music videos, depicts the preparation for a ritual sacrifice. And in their opinion, what's being portrayed is Freddie Mercury is being prepared for sacrifice. So there's this particular point in the video where Freddie is all dressed up in this flamboyant costume, is coming down the staircase. And there's this big fat woman, looks like an opera singer, who treads on his bare foot with her foot. And they've said that's a sign first of submission, a slave submitting to a handler. But also it's marking Freddie out as a sacrificial victim. And that's quite chilling when you consider that Freddie only lived another 7 years after that video. And very soon afterwards, we're told he got ill from AIDS. I think the truth of the matter is he probably got ill from the medication that was prescribed to treat AIDS, if AIDS was ever even a real thing. But AZT certainly was, which is the principal drug that was getting put out there to supposedly combat this terrible virus. Reminds me of something. What can it be? And we all know how it ended up for Freddie. He just wasted away before our very eyes and faded away. And it raises the quite chilling suggestion that it could have been known about some years in advance and that Freddie was lined up as a ritual sacrifice to the industry. And for anyone for whom that sounds outrageous and fantastic, I get it, because when I first started looking into all this stuff, that sort of thing sounded outrageous and fantastic to me. But the more you delve into the research and the more you look at the evidence that's available to you, not least the testimonials and the eyewitness claims of those that have come out of these kind of institutions like, SRA survivors and such, then you come to realize that this sort of thing does unfortunately go on all the time within entertainment and popular culture. It's just a part of how these folks get down. It's a testament to their sick, diseased, satanic nature. And just because it sounds outrageous and fantastic at the start doesn't mean that it's not possible. And that's the dark and devastating world of this kind of research, unfortunately. Wish it was some other way, but I'm just merely reporting what I've found.
Well, in the Freemason Bible, it says when a sacrifice is made, the sacrifice has to be made inside of a pentagon. And a pentagon is the pentagram.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at a lot of these, maybe some of these public executions or some of these sacrifices like you were talking about with Freddie Mercury, you could probably go back and there would be some kind of symbolism surrounding that's like a pentagon, if you looked at it from above.
What's crazy about the Queen story is I've researched this because I've done a live presentation on it. I did it at Halloween last year, actually. And part of that involves breaking down the lyrical content of Bohemian Rhapsody, Queen's most famous song. And it's another thing that was staring us all right there in plain sight, but so many probably didn't see it. That song has been endlessly scrutinized by music critics for decades. And they're like, oh, it's so ambiguous. Nobody really knows what it means. But it's fairly clear when you look at it from this perspective that the song is talking about a Faustian bargain, a deal that's being made by the protagonist in the song in exchange for great fame and fortune. This goes back to the original German legend of Faust, who was this sort of accomplished, wealthy individual who had gained great worldly pleasure and acquisition, but felt like he was lacking knowledge, spiritual knowledge and holistic knowledge. And so he makes a deal, metaphorically, with the devil and sells his soul, offers up his mortal soul in exchange for this great worldly knowledge. And a common trope that's run throughout the music industry for decades, going all the way back to Robert Johnson, the blues musician in the 1930s, who's said to have made a deal at the crossroads with the devil in exchange for great musical proficiency, is this idea of musicians trading their souls for engineered fame and fortune. And that, when you look at it, is what the Freddie Mercury character is talking about in Bohemian Rhapsody. And when he says, Mama just killed a man, he's talking about a metaphorical killing, which is the killing of his old self, or his ego, if you like. Because now he's become somebody or something else because of the deal that he's made. And then the middle section of that song, where it goes all operatic, is a battle in the heavens between the forces of good and evil. It's angels and demons. They sound like choirs, and they're doing battle in the spiritual realm for Freddie's soul to determine, which side is going to get Freddie's soul. And then evidently in the song, the forces of good, the angels, win out and they claim back Freddie's soul. And that's why at the end of the song, it goes very calm, the coda at the end, because Freddie's been through all this and he's reflecting on what's happened to him. And that song was written by Freddie Mercury himself, Farouk Bulsara. And I wonder whether it chronicles his own induction into the music business. So it's autobiographical. Freddie is basically telling in allegorical form through this very operatic song how he himself came to become famous. And unfortunately, an aspect of selling your soul that often occurs is the devil, to use that term, sometimes wants it back, or sometimes wants more from you. It's payback time, So you've had the fame and the fortune and the great wealth and the riches, and there comes a point where now you've got to pay the price for that. And, I wonder whether Freddie's ultimate demise could have been connected to some kind of deal that he made early on. Another piece of footage that I show in that talk is Freddie at a very early Queen concert from the early 70s, and he's holding up some nails, artificial nails on his hands. And he says, "Do you like my claws?" And he goes, "They're a present from the devil himself." And then the audience starts laughing, and he goes, they're laughing, they don't believe me, they don't believe me. So you've got to wonder how much truth was getting conveyed there. You know, all of this stuff just makes you wonder. When you approach all these things with a fresh pair of eyes and a new mind, coming from a renewed perspective, it does tend to put a different slant on so many things that you've been familiar with possibly for decades.
What if the selling of the soul is also metaphorical and allegorical, meaning that once you take the money from these people, you can't go against these people, right? They are funding you, they are funding your career, and you cannot back out of the deal, or else your career is then over. You are then destroyed, and worst case scenario, you are killed. I mean, when you look at some of the most popular musicians, since the 50s and beyond, have all died in some weird and strange way. The most popular people, I mean, Elvis, John Lennon, Michael Jackson, all of these people, Prince, Prince was later on in life, but still, he was doing a lot of things that was going against the music industry. He was trying to get the rights back to all of his music. And he wasn't letting that music being distributed out. He didn't want it on streaming. And then 2 years after he gets the rights back to all of his music, he's dead.
So if you think about 1950s icons, and you mentioned these earlier, Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, if you accept that he did die in 1977, and James Dean. I mean, what are the chances? James Dean dead at 24. Marilyn was dead at 36. And then you've got people like River Phoenix, who was dead at, 20-something, I guess, and many other actors who die young after becoming iconic. And what are the chances of that happening as an accidental sort of thing? I mean, I called my last book No One's Dad's a Plumber to emphasize the observation that when it comes to famous rock musicians, you're very hard pressed to find many fathers of the real household name A-listers who had regular working class jobs like a plumber. Instead, they were all lieutenant colonels or governors or, Lord mayors or whatever. And I've often wondered what would happen if the same number of plumbers turned up dead as do rock musicians and actors. So, news breaks that, Michael Jackson's died. And people are like, oh dear, that's terrible. Whitney Houston's died in a bathtub. Oh dear, that's terrible. Now Prince has died in an elevator. Oh dear, that's terrible. And it's all chalked up as, well, that's the music game for you. These rock stars, they do drugs and they live these crazy lives, and it's no wonder so many of them wash up dead, But if news started coming through that today a plumber died in, Buffalo, New York, and a plumber died today in Orlando, Florida, and a plumber died today in Manchester, England, eventually wouldn't people start asking, what is it? What's going on? Why is plumbing such a dangerous profession? What, did they all drown in bathroom floods? Why are all these plumbers turning up dead? But because it's musicians and rock stars, they just get away with it. So I think that's why there's such a high body count. The controllers can knock many of these individuals off if that's what's happening, and I think it personally is. And the public don't demand full inquiries. They don't demand full answers. They just accept what they're told in the mainstream, that it's an unfortunate byproduct of these industries, folks. That's fame and fortune and, these crazy lives lived in the public spotlight for you. Getting away with it.
Well, they're also probably like, well, they were rich and famous. They had their 5 minutes of fame. They had all of this money. Who really cares? They were way better off than me. So what? They died young. Amy Winehouse, same scenario. There's so many of them that it's almost like we've been desensitized to it in a lot of ways. I mean, Kurt Cobain as well. Have you seen the information that's been coming out about Kurt Cobain?
Well, it's been coming out for years. It's pretty much on the public record now that he was murdered. You know, I think the idea that he committed suicide, very few people accept that anymore. But information has been leaking out for years, pointing to the fact that he was murdered. But still, no perpetrators brought to justice. You know, whoever it was, still walking around out there.
That's the problem with a lot of this stuff, is that it seems like we just kind of keep rolling on, like nobody really cares. It's on to the next thing. A couple of weeks ago, it was the Epstein files. Then it was the UFO files. And now it's war with Iran, when we didn't get any answers or any conclusions really to the first thing that happened just a couple of weeks ago. But people have already forgotten about that and have already moved on with their lives. It's almost exactly like with COVID. I feel like everyone has just kind of forgotten about COVID. And I've recently gone back and gotten reasonably pissed off about 9/11. And I'm thinking to myself, how did we let this happen? How did we let this happen with absolutely no investigation? You're telling me that nobody in high up government said, this is freaking weird. Why did these buildings collapse like this? What hit the Pentagon? Why was there absolutely no plane wreckage in Pennsylvania, where the plane supposedly went down, that just made a crater in the, I got balloons, I did the air quotes, where the plane supposedly went down? There's just a crater there. There's no airplane wreckage, hardly zero airplane wreckage at the Pentagon. Like, did no one think to, I mean, it makes me kind of disappointed. I was too young to do anything about it at that point. I was like, 8 years old when the planes hit the towers. I was too young to do anything about it, but I'm pretty disappointed in the adults of that time, because literally every single news station said that there were bombs. They all said that there were bombs. The firefighters said that there were bombs. People that were in the buildings, the eyewitnesses, said that there were bombs. There was even warnings of people to get out of the building because they knew that the building was going to collapse. I might be getting off on a tangent here, but it's just kind of something that's resurfaced within me that I didn't realize that I was that pissed off about until recently, that I've been kind of harboring these feelings about 9/11.
Well, we should be pissed off. And with me, I've been reliving the madness of COVID recently, because I've just completed my third truth fiction novel, The Tragedy and the Triumph, which is set in those times. So this is the third piece of fiction that I've written. The first one I wrote in 2019, prior to all the COVID madness. And this one was The Cause and the Cure. It was set in the early 90s, 1990 and 91, based on my recollections of those times. Before your time, from the sounds of it, youngster.
Yeah.
1990.
Yeah,
Yeah, don't know what it is.
Yeah, 93. Yeah.
Great times in so many ways. So then the second story I set in 2001 with the events of 9/11 as the backdrop. And it's the same characters from the first story, but 11 years on. And I've got all the very real events of those times as a backdrop to the narrative, as a subplot. And this latest story, I've got the same characters again, but this one is set in 2020. So it's 30 years on from the original. And the characters have aged 30 years and been through a whole load of shit in their personal lives and stuff. And they've evolved and changed as individuals, as we do over time. But in researching this one, to get the background detail authentic, I had to relive 2020 and 21 again, which in many ways was horrific, because I found myself wallowing in all the emotions and all the trauma of those times. It was bad enough bloody living through it the first time without having to wallow in it again. And part of the reason for that is because I'm producing a soundtrack, like a movie style soundtrack. I think my novels are the only books that come with their own movie style soundtracks. So I take audio footage from the time, like little snippets of news clips and combine it with the music that was around at the time. So the one from 1990 was great because the music that was around in the early 90s was incredible. And I've put it with bits of audio from things like the Gulf War or the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq by Saddam Hussein in 1990, and the last days of Margaret Thatcher, her regime in Britain, and the poll tax riots that went on over here, and acid house and rave culture, which was a big thing in those times. And then for the 2001 story, I've got all the news footage from 9/11 combined with music from the times. And for this story, 2020, I've got snippets of all these creeps, all these psychopaths, all these traitors to humanity, like Fauci and Gates and Trump, even, first time round. Trudeau, Ardern, Boris Johnson, Matt Hancock, Chris Whitty, all just lying, blatantly lying through their teeth, knowing what they're doing. And it just reminded me of how all these so-called governments of the world did everything in tandem with each other all at the same time. So again, like you were saying there, questioning why certain things weren't addressed at the time of 9/11. How can it be that pretty much every nation on Earth looked at the situation with this supposed virus and went, now I think the way to deal with this is lockdowns, get people to stay at home, get people to wear masks, shut down their businesses, we'll shut down schools, we'll basically put the whole nation on hold. And then the next nation along goes, yes, we've looked at the evidence and we too believe that masks and lockdowns and social distancing are the best way to go. And then, 90 other nations all go, yes, we think that's the way to go as well. Is it not obvious that it was a coordinated worldwide plan? It was an agenda that was long planned for. It was in movies, TV shows and music videos decades before, depictions of what would come to pass in 2020, drip fed into the subconscious minds of the viewing public for all those years and decades beforehand. It's so obvious. And it just made me so mad to revisit all this and to reflect that here we are 6 years on and not a whole lot has changed. Not a whole lot of lessons have been learned. Yes, you could argue that there's quite a number of people that have woken up. Do I get balloons if I do air quotes?
No, doesn't look like you get balloons. It's only me. I'm the special one.
It's not working for me. And yes, we've got hundreds of thousands, if not a few million on our side now, which wouldn't have been the case before. So you could make the case for that being a positive outcome. But in terms of the perpetrators of these agendas, and let's not forget, many people lost loved ones, family members, as a result of deliberate, coordinated action towards population reduction. Most people will have lost someone within their immediate family or circle of friends, or will know somebody that has. That should be enough of a catalyst to make a whole load of people mad and to demand answers, and for those that perpetrated these outrages to be brought to justice. And yet, what do we have? Fauci walking around a free man, Gates walking around a free man. Gates was on the friggin' Epstein logs, and this is public knowledge, but he's still walking around a free man. Hancock, Johnson, all of them, every bloody so-called world leader walking around completely free. Not a single one of them did a single night of jail time. They're not even being called to account, not even being asked to explain why they made the decisions that they did. And that's why it's pretty bloody depressing to look back at what happened in 2020 and to reflect on where we're at now. And not too much has changed. And this is the main narrative of my story, the tragedy and the triumph. Why I've called it that is because the tragedy part of it is obvious. It's what I've just outlined. The triumph part in my story is that the masses within Oxford, so my stories are set in the city of Oxford, which is where I grew up. It's a place I know very well. And Oxford serves as a microcosm for the world at large. So everything that happens within the Oxford Ring Road is like a metaphor for what could be happening elsewhere in the world, in the entire world. So the people of Oxford do rise up eventually. They do take to the streets, they do rebel, they do vow to bring down this insidious tyrannical control system, and they take steps to achieve this, you know, unify and coordinate and get the thing done. And this is what we should be seeing in the world as a result of what's been done to all of us, but sadly we're not. So at least I can make it happen in my story. At least I can have a happy ending there. And it does take some pretty extreme measures for the masses to get motivated to this sort of action in my story. And I feel that is what it's going to take if this is ever going to happen, you know, in the real world. It's going to take some pretty extreme circumstances to light that touch paper. And I don't know what that would ever look like if it's ever going to happen. But writing this story just kind of served as a reminder of that principle to me.
I think they believed that they had everybody so docile, so medicated up, so zombified that they knew that they could get away with it. Because now it's practically not a big deal anymore, Mark. Like, they've admitted that the shots basically did nothing. That masks were nothing. It didn't work. It didn't help. The social distancing did nothing. The closing of businesses did nothing. They've all but admitted that, at least in the United States, they kind of have in a roundabout way. They haven't come out and directly said it, but it's been put into documents so that people can see, right? And I'm pretty sure that they knew that they could get away with it because the traumatization level was so high to everybody on the planet all at one time that the feeling of normalcy, they just wanted to get back to the normalcy. And they would have, I don't know who was happy with the normalcy. Who was happy with the normalcy to begin with? It's like the people that have been in this community didn't know about all of this stuff before. It did. Why were you so ready to go back to the thing that you hated so much? It literally did not make a lot of sense to me, Mark, but I'm pretty sure that they knew that they could get away with it. That's the reason that they did it in the first place, because they would not have done it if they believed that there was a high risk chance of rebellion. There's like the Event 201 with Bill Gates, right? That was a pandemic simulation. Like, they ran this simulation so many times, and they knew that that was what the simulation was for, was to figure out if they could get away with it or not.
Yeah. Well, they've been putting it into movies and TV shows for decades, like I said. So it was a long planned for thing. And as you observed, they wouldn't have gone ahead with it unless they were absolutely confident that they had the public's consciousness right where they wanted it to be and that they owned people's minds. And to be fair, they did employ military-grade psychological weaponry in that agenda, you know. It was being coordinated, I would argue, out of Tavistock in London, which is like the world-leading centre of mind control fomentation, where psyops of all kinds are cooked up by behavioural scientists and psychologists and these people that know exactly how the human psyche works and therefore how it can be manipulated and played. So we were up against a formidable enemy in this one. And they threw everything they had at us, but they, at the same time, they were very confident that they were going to get away with it. And they did. And I hate it that they seem to have called it absolutely correctly, because they must have known that none of them were going to get called out for it. None of them were going to have to serve justice for it. There wasn't going to be any kind of uprising or rebellion in the streets. They didn't have to worry about that. And even if there had been, they possessed the strength to be able to put that down and suppress it. So the audacity of the whole thing is just astounding. And also the hubris and the arrogance of just coming up with a plan like this in the first place to basically lock down the entire world and affect the lives of absolutely everyone within it. So it's a pretty sobering thing to recall what was done to us People have all kinds of theories as to why we were allowed to pretty much return to how things were in 2019 from sort of 2022 onwards. And many people would argue that that's not a great thing because the world was not in a great condition then. But things aren't as tyrannical and as dystopian as so many of us thought they would be. I remember in 2020 and 21 thinking, well, this is it, life as we know it is over because it's only going to be downhill from here. Our quality of life has just taken a major downfall. So I was as surprised as anyone to see international travel open back up again and society basically return to where it was, because I had considered that the plan was to keep everything just locked down on an ongoing basis. So it makes me wonder, going back to what we were talking about earlier, about when they replace people like Jim Carrey and Madonna and Paul McCartney, whether in very large part these are experiments to see how many people notice and what they can get away with. So maybe the whole COVID agenda was a massive exercise on a much larger scale to see whether they could get away with that. They would have been very confident that they could, but they just wanted to test the waters nevertheless and just assure themselves that they really did have the public's mindset exactly where they wanted it. And they would have walked away from that one, if that's what it was, a massive social experiment, very satisfied with the accuracy with which they called it and the great job that these behavioral scientists and psychologists did in predicting the way people would respond to it, which for the most part was exactly the way they knew they would, with a few honorable exceptions.
But the thing about it is I don't believe that they could do it again so soon. I don't think that they could do it again. It would not pass the smell test. But you're talking about things that were setting up for 2020, and that reminds me of the movie Contagion that came out in 2011. And just 9 short years later, after that movie came out, almost everything in that movie came true, down to the details.
Right.
Airborne virus, supposedly, right? Pandemic, mask, even the freaking toilet paper, bro. Supermarkets empty. And of course, the vaccine at the very end of the movie. It's exactly how our reality played out.
And that movie was taken by Matt Hancock, who was the health secretary in Boris Johnson's government in 2020, as his blueprint for how the UK was going to handle the so-called pandemic. And he actually admitted this in a parliament hearing. He said, well, I've been taking guidance from this movie, Contagion from 2011, and all the things that they were doing in that movie, I think we need to do now, social distancing. And they even called it that, social distancing. Who'd ever heard of that term before that movie? And, 6 feet apart and the wearing of masks and shutting down schools. I think we need to do all this. So basically, it was his way of telling everyone it's a friggin' movie. You're watching a movie. It's fiction, it's fantasy, it's imagination. None of it is real. And then a few months down the line, when the UK's vaccination programme is announced as the only possible way out of the pandemic situation, just like in the movie, Hancock appears on TV on Piers Morgan's morning chat show, and he's fake crying. And it's so bloody obvious. I dug out the footage again the other day to put together this soundtrack for my book. And it's just disgusting. You've got Hancock and he's laughing and he's pretending to wipe away a tear. But you can see he's stifling a laugh. It's this classic psychopath's duper's delight thing. And he's trying to mimic human emotion because he doesn't have these himself. Psychopaths lack the full range of human emotions, the full range within their capabilities. So he's pretending to cry and he's trying to act the way a regular person might when they're overcome by emotion in this way, but he can't stop himself from laughing. And the reason he's laughing is because they've just introduced the first person in Britain to receive the new COVID vaccine, and it's this old boy, and his name is given as William Shakespeare. And Hancock is there laughing, pissing himself, and Piers Morgan's in on it because if he was a real journalist, he would say, "Excuse me, Mr. Hancock, you appear to be laughing. Why are you laughing, sir?" But of course, he just lets him get away with it. And Hancock's pissing himself laughing because he's just said, this guy is William Shakespeare. It's his coded way of telling you this is fiction. What you're watching is fiction. It's a play. That's why they chose the name William Shakespeare. So it's right there in plain sight. People are watching this stuff on their TVs, in their living rooms, and soaking it all up into their subconscious. And they're just accepting it. Most people, I mean, some noticed, of course, but most people just go along with it. And Hancock gets away with it, as they all do. And yeah, it's a pretty damning indictment of the psychology and the level of consciousness of the vast, overwhelming bulk of humanity, not just in Britain, but everywhere.
That's insanity that he used a fictional movie to inform him on real life policy.
Right?
That's literally insanity.
Yeah.
I really can't believe that. So, no, I mean, I believe it 100%. I believe exactly what you're telling me, but it's just so ridiculous that it seems unbelievable that that would be allowed. I mean, you're running an entire country and you watch a movie from 2011 and decide to make your laws and pass your policy based off of a fictional movie that happened 9 years ago that wasn't even real. It's freaking unbelievable.
It tells you all you need to know. And Hancock was totally incompetent, totally unfit for office. He was just this bumbling, low IQ imbecile. And then supposedly running the country, although really just taking instruction from those that really run things, is the bumbling buffoon Johnson. I mean, how anyone could take this guy seriously. We need to lock down immediately, and the virus is getting out of control, folks. And who ever talks like that? How can you take anyone like that seriously? With this ridiculous Etonian dialect and just completely out of touch with the way regular people live their lives, because all he's ever known is wealth and privilege and, having everything handed to him on a plate. These people are just ridiculous, totally incompetent, just fools, dunces, morons, and people take instruction from them, and people allow their lives to be dictated to by individuals like this. It's just tragic, man. It's just tragic.
Well, you also have like the Terminator in 2029. 2029 was the start of the machine war against the humans that prompted Skynet to send the Terminator back in time to kill Sarah Connor. And we had Elon Musk saying last year that if you're going to get rich, you better do it now, because in around 4 years, it's not going to matter anymore, because AI will essentially be running the show by then. So, I mean, I'm and that lines up with the Terminator timeline there. But I believe that there's one movie that is really important for us to re-examine, and that movie is Civil War. That movie came out in 2024. And I think that this needs to be taken seriously, because the Civil War inside of that movie started because the president refused to leave office after serving his terms. Like I feel is a real possibility with Trump in 2028. And it seems like everything has kind of been set in motion for that happening. I've even seen some kind of rumblings online. I spoke about this, 4 or 5 months ago on another show that I did. And I was like, this kind of seems like what's going on. He's trying to line up the corruption angle. He's trying to line up that it was the 2020 election was stolen, and if he can prove that the 2020 election really was stolen, then that will give him the okay in his mind that he can run for a third term. So then all he has to do is kind of rewrite the Constitution and get it to a Supreme Court judge to sign off on it, and then boom, he's running for a third term, and that will be the end of the United States.
By which point, dude will be, what, 82? So yeah, an 82-year-old president. What could possibly go wrong? Joe Biden, anyone?
That's another one that I can't believe. I can't believe that we let Joe Biden be president. That is one that we are going to look back on, I believe, and be like, what were we thinking? How did we let this bumbling idiot that can't string 2 to 3 words together in a coherent sentence be president for 4 years?
Well, I would argue that that wasn't him. Going back to doubles again. I mean, there are some sort of alleged replacements where it's difficult to prove that this was what actually took place. But when it comes to Joe Biden, whoever or whatever that was that occupied the White House for those 4 years was not the original biological Joe Biden. All you got to do is look at photographs of the real Joe Biden from when he was Barack Obama's vice president, sort of 2008 backwards. And interestingly, most of these pictures have been scrubbed from the internet. A few years ago, pictures of the real Biden just disappeared, and there's very few that you can get. I think if you do a Google image search now under Joe Biden 2008, you get a couple of images that you can use to compare with the ones of this individual that was in the White House for those 4 years. And from that alone, you can see it's not the same person. You know, this guy was replaced. A name which constantly comes up as a suggestion for the guy that was playing the public role of Joe Biden is a British actor from Manchester by the name of Struan Roger. That's Roger with a D, and Struan spelled S-T-R-U-A-N, which is an anagram of Saturn. And this guy has got an IMDb profile. So if you look up Struan Roger, you will notice that a couple of the pictures you'll find there resemble very much the individual that we've known as Joe Biden these past few years. So that appears to be what was done there. And again, it was done in plain sight. I mean, people say when it comes to Paul McCartney, how can they have replaced one of the best known musicians and best known celebrities in the world and nobody noticed or cared? Well, how about replacing the President of the United States or the King of England and nobody notices or cares? So there's the ultimate acid test for you, where they can get away with that, and did.
Yeah, and people were like, "Oh, Joe Biden was so bad. It became such really apparent that last year during the debates that Biden wasn't cognitively there." And I was like, "What Joe Biden had you been watching for the past 4 years? He was always like that.
Right.
For those 4 years from the first debate in the 2020 election, he was like that. He was just as bad. I mean, he did get worse, but it was pretty much the same throughout the entire presidency.
So the
He would get up there and say random ass shit that didn't make any kind of coherence at all. Remember the ice cream thing? Oh, look, ice cream truck in the middle of a speech. Like, what are you doing, bro?
Yeah, sniffing kids' hair, pooping his pants on the golf course. So the question arises, if it was an actor playing the role, and I would contend that it was, did the actor himself have dementia? And was this just him playing the role to the best of his abilities? Or was he fully cognizant that he was portraying somebody with dementia? Was that the act? Was he deliberately pretending to be mentally retarded as part of the acting role? I guess we'll never know.
Well, that would be the move, is to get somebody with actual dementia, because then you got a win-win right there. Like, you're not going to lose on that one. You got an actor playing a role that actually has dementia. But here's one for you. Some people believed that Jim Carrey was playing Joe Biden. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I've heard that. But my money is still on this dude, Struan Roger.
Well, Mark, we've covered a lot here today. We've went all over the place. It's been amazing talking with you. I very much enjoy it. We need to do it again sometime. Can you let people know where they can find you and plug your new book, and when will your new book be out?
Sure. Well, I'm aiming for the 22nd of March for the release of my new novel. So that's 322 in the American date format. And I've chosen that deliberately because the occultists, the Satanists of this world, like to harness the incoming energy of the spring equinox around about that time of year. And you find that they often launch many of their psyops and their stunts at the time of the spring equinox. Almost every year there's a new war or a terrorist activity that just happens to occur around that time. So my idea is to launch my books at that time of year to kind of offset some of that dark negative energy and hopefully harness the important power of those times to empower something a bit more uplifting and beneficial to humanity. So I put out my book No One's Dad's a Plumber on 322 in 2025, and I'm aiming for that date with this one. So the new novel is called The Tragedy and the Triumph. It's the completion of my truth fiction trilogy. I had a great deal of fun writing it. It was very cathartic. I poured a lot of my heart and soul into it, and I'm very much looking forward to that getting out there. So the paperback version will be on Amazon from around that time. And anyone in America or Canada or that side of the world is probably going to want to get it on Amazon. I do post out copies myself, signed copies here in the UK and Europe. But it's been my experience that when I try and send these things out to America or Australia or further afield, they just don't get there. They get seized by customs or they go missing. So the safest way to get hold of the book is simply to get it from Amazon, or if you really dislike Amazon, it's going to be on Barnes and Noble. Other than that, all my work can be accessed via my main website, which is djmarkdevlin.com. So you can get through to my YouTube channel from there, all my videos, my Patreon channel, my books, links to all my books, my music shows, as well as my speech-based podcasts. I do a couple of music shows regularly as well. So DJ Mark Devlin is the place to head for all of that. And you can email me from that site as well. My email address is on there if you want to correspond. So, yeah, that's it.
Thanks so much for coming on, Mark. Really appreciate it. The links to Mark's information will be in the description of this video for everyone else. Thanks for watching. Please be sure to hit the thumbs up button, help the channel in the algorithm, share, subscribe, hit the bell icon as well for notifications. All of my links are also in the description of this video, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Cheers.